hello everyone. We are live with this I Need Living Conversations 133 sessions that we've been giving you with Secret Blue Heron Woman, who is our leader in Aloha I Need Out Living. This session we have uh, Dismantling the Germ Theory, a very exciting subject, something we've covered lightly before in one of our first sessions or many sessions ago. We've of course have talked about this, but this time it's time to talk about it again, to go deeper into it, and it's
Yeah,
really important to have this as a precedent so that we can talk about the rest of the things, and so that we can understand what freedom is, so that we can reach freedom, so that we can reach plenitude, so that we can
right.
do all the things that we
Yeah.
we want to do but we can't do, because if we're stuck with this idea that germs are our enemies, then we're not going to get very far. So that's today's subject. And I'm here with Sacred Blue Heron Women, our inspiring leader. And thank you folks for being here. I'm Julian Catari, and I'm in La Paz, Bolivia today, uh, in a hotel room. So sorry for the mic sound or whatever internet connection may happen, but it's going to be only for this time. So welcome everyone. Welcome to this inspiring session. So let's begin. What do you have
So
for us?
Voltaire once said a long time ago, doctors are women and men who prescribe medications of which they know little to cure diseases of which they know less in human beings of which they know nothing. This was said by Voltaire. When did Voltaire live?
I
Long
don't know.
time ago. They had
17th
hardly
century?
any medications when Voltaire was alive.
Yeah.
Doctors are women and men who prescribe medications of which they know little. That's absolutely true. They get schooled on them by the drug salesmen who know even less of them. They are taught by the companies what they need to sell the medications to the doctors, and that's how that gets passed to cure diseases of which doctors know less in human beings of which they know nothing. So virtually all of the information about disease promoted and taught by the medical establishment as we know it in any country that we know is erroneous. Let me say that again. Virtually all of the information about disease and that is promoted and taught by the medical establishment is erroneous. And virtually all of the information about microorganisms that are referred to as germs is entirely erroneous.
Mm-hmm.
Today, this date, there is still no logical basis in science for the germ theory. However, it has become fundamental law with concern to the medical profession and the pharmaceutical companies that support the theory. So in a very real sense, the science of medicine is more like a dogmatic religion that preaches eternal damnation to non-believers and excommunication in the form of delicensing and jail for non-conformists. The ultimate demons in this religion are the germs, a group of fiendish opportunists who take advantage of us, and we are defenseless against them unless we pray with the high priests of medicine and pay them big bucks, who act as an intermediary between us and God. There are a number of sources that provide validation of the statement that the germ theory lacks any original scientific proof. And this statement was made well before you and I were even thought of, well before your mom and dad and my mom and dad were even thought of.
Wow.
One of these sources is a Dr. Leverson, who in May of 1911 said in a lecture in London, the entire fabric of the germ theory of disease rests upon assumptions which not only have not been proved, but which are incapable of proof, and many of them can be proved to be the reverse of truth. The basic one of these unproven assumptions is wholly due to a man named Louis Pasteur, who created a pasteurization process, right? Is the hypothesis that the so-called infectious and contagious disorders we know as diseases are caused by germs. He proposed that. And then he proceeded to create the pasteurization, which screws up milk so bad it causes lactose intolerance, right? So,
oh, really?
Dr. Bailey wrote then in 1928, I told you, all this is before your mom and dad and my mom and dad were even thought of. I am prepared to maintain with scientifically established facts that in no single instance has it been conclusively proved that any microorganism is the specific cause of a disease. 1928, we knew this. Dr. Mendelssohn wrote in his book that the belief in the authority of the medical establishment is misplaced. He describes the medical establishment as the Church of Modern Medicine and justifies it with this statement. Modern medicine can't survive without our faith because modern medicine is neither an art nor a science. It's a religion. Just ask why enough times and sooner or later you'll reach the chasm of faith when they say, we don't know, but trust us, we're the doctors. Because we went to medical school for 8 years and have $100,000 in student loan debt, so just trust us. This religion originates from a false perception of the human body as essentially a machine of separate parts that are fundamentally chemical in nature, meaning that a malfunction of the part can be fixed by altering its chemical nature. But the internal environment of our human bodies as living organisms bear no resemblance whatever to the artificial environment that is created by scientists in the lab for their experiments. So bottom line is, once they take your blood to check it, it's no longer has any resemblance to the blood that's actually in your body. So nothing is valid. There is also no original scientific evidence that definitively demonstrates that any virus is the cause of any disease. The discovery of particles in samples taken from people with a disease and those particles being called viruses, and the assumption that the presence of the particles represents a causal relationship is like blaming the firemen for being the cause of fires because they are directly associated with fire and found where there is fire.
That's very good example.
Most recently, in the last 10 years, Dr. Stefan Lanka, a biologist in Germany, has said that in the case of my studies, I and others have not been able to find proof of the existence of disease-causing viruses anywhere. Because other biologists and scientists know that simply finding a microbe in your body is not enough to convict it of causing a disease. So it's been estimated that our human bodies contain approximately 50 trillion cells. So 50 trillion, 50 trillion beings living under one roof, right? Our skin. And it's also estimated that our bodies contain the same amount of bacteria. So, oh, wait, we just doubled it. So now we have 100 trillion residents living under one roof in one long house, like the Haudenosaunee. But rather than causing disease, they are one of the most ancient life forms, bacteria, these 50 trillion bacteria, out of which life has evolved. Bacteria are saprotrophic, which means they feed on and break down dead organisms and release the nutrients back into the environment to be utilized by other organisms. They're kind of like vultures, because that's what vultures do. They're also involved in the cycle of important elements like oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon, which we are formed of. And cells in our body die every day. It's just part of the normal process of life. And that also includes the processes necessary for the elimination of these dead cells from our body. So bacteria perform the function of decomposing damaged and dead materials within our body, a function that is similar to the breakdown of food in our intestines that results in the release of nutrients in the appropriate form for our bodies to absorb. So in fact, bacteria are the biggest part of our gut brain. So we have three brains, right? We have the brain, we have the heart brain, and we have the gut brain. And the bacteria are the biggest part of our gut brain.
Yeah. Oh man, we are the gut brain, yeah.
So life is an incredibly complex interdependence of matter and energy or spirit among millions of species beyond and within our skin. The world is not a battleground in which germs must be killed, because clearly what kills germs will kill all life forms. So the basic basis of biological life is togetherness, Eine. It's symbiosis, Eine. And in this place there is no war, no place, and in this there is no place for war and destruction. Destruction happens naturally because that's part of creation, evolution. But no place for war. So given the proper conditions, nature is always the best healer. So we can each individually assist in this healing by cooperating with the forces of nature. She takes her time, which is slowly, like a tree grows. She never rushes to get a sick man or animal on their feet because she demands slow and steady convalescence. So a Dr. Henry Beeler in 1965 said, "Years of laboratory observation and experimentation have taught me that germs do not cause disease. They are simply there in the individual and able to multiply because of the imbalance or the sickness." He also said that penicillin works by whipping our body's glands into hyperactivity to stimulate the body to get rid of the penicillin because it is so toxic.
Wow.
Penicillin is, in fact, so toxic that it is thrown out by the kidneys just a few seconds after it is injected. So all antibiotics are inherently toxic to our bodies and bodies of our animal sisters and brothers. Science has also found that every one of us has fungi as part of our microbiomes, mushrooms, imagine that. And their function is to provide assistance with the processes of decomposition of the dead and damaged cells. So with concern to cancer, the AMA, or American Medical Association, that is owned and operated by Rockefeller, Big Oil, has established 5-year survival rate guidelines for doctors in the case of diagnosing with cancer. Since they say that is the average time the person can live with cancer before dying. However, science has shown that if you do not follow medical treatment for a malignant diagnosis, and if you choose to do nothing, not even change your stress level, you will live 12 years.
I remember you telling me that, and I've been sharing that information already.
So when you fully live the truth that you are half spirit, half matter, you will not even be given a malignant diagnosis. Back in 1878, Louis Pasteur was credited with the full tenets of the germ theory, solidifying all its laws and postulates, which are still used to this day in the determination of dis-ease. Louis Pasteur was a chemist with no training in biology whatsoever. So the real credit for all of what Louis Pasteur supposedly did really belongs to Pierre-Antoine Béchamp. He was a French scientist, and his work was based on the observation of live tissues as opposed to the dead tissue samples of lab work today. In these live tissue samples, he saw tiny bodies he called microzyma. Now, fast forward, 100 years, a little less, about 75 years to Wilhelm Reich. He called them bions, same thing, microzyma. He proposed publicly that these microzyma, or bions, are the basic unit of life. They're indestructible, immutable, and eternal. He found microzyma in both plant and animal tissues. He found them in both healthy and diseased tissue. And in healthy tissues, he found them to be normal, constructive parts of the growing metabolism of the cell. In unhealthy tissues, he discovered that these microzyma that were the basic unit of life evolved into bacteria. But by this time, Pasteur was often running with the germ theory and was being financed by the Rockefellers, Rothschilds at that time, and would not listen to what Béchamp had realized. What Béchamp had realized was that the medium, and this is the same thing Bruce Lipton says, the medium determines whether or not microorganisms such as bacteria are present. So the environment, the medium, as discovered by Bruce Lipton centuries later, right? Béchamp saw clearly that all bacteria are endogenous. That is, they come from within us, from within our own tissues and cells, from what he called the microzyma, or what Wilhelm Reich called bions. Béchamp realized that bacteria and other microbes are formed out of necessity by our own bodies. They do not come from outside in an attacking mode of virulence. But all of Béchamp's work never made it to history records because money can't be made out of bacteria that don't cause germ disease, right? His work showed that all bacteria originate from the microzyma and that bacteria are pleomorphic. They're shapeshifters. They're the ultimate shapeshifters. They change shape upon the need of the tissue. Pasteur, on the other hand, claimed that bacteria are monomorphic, that there is only one shape per strain or species of bacteria, and that they originate from outside the body, and this is still the dogma that persists today. Béchamp obtained the carcass of a kitten, put it in calcium carbonate, which is chalk, for 8 years. That's a long study. He took special care to prepare the carcass aseptically, which means no germs could possibly get in through the outside world. And when he examined the carcass 8 years later, it was mostly decomposed. Go figure. He found that there were varying forms of bacteria with abundant microzyma. So in that dead kitten that had been put in chalk. So, and there were numerous other scientists that did the same experiments, and they came up with the exact same results. These microzyma, or bions, are everywhere. They're the basic forms of life. They're Holy Mother in minutia. A doctor today would tell you that, of course, certain strains of bacteria are endogenous, sitting inside your body, just waiting to take advantage of you and kill you. What the medical profession is missing is that bacteria, virus, and fungi are not time bombs just waiting to go off inside us. They are actually created out of our necessity, following the commands of the organic web of life. They spring forth from within each cell upon need. In us, as healthy people of well-being, they would spring forth to eat poisonous organic material, which is the most common form, being that of excess proteins, in an effort to cleanse our systems. So if there is an abundance of toxicity in the form of proteins, especially from vaccines, and then from processed food, they will be created in abundance. The respiratory and metabolic and excretory processes, which is breathing, eating, and going to the bathroom, can then make the surrounding body tissue sore. This is when we go to the doctor and she or he tells us there's a bacterial infection in our bodies that we need antibiotics for. And this is as smart as blaming the firemen for fires because they are at fires.
Yeah.
The bacteria did not create the sickness. We're sick because of imbalances caused by physical, emotional, and spiritual issues. The microbes that arise from our cells, which might be the microzyma Béchamp identifies as which are the microzyma that he identifies, are members of the web of life, just as we are. So when our physical matter becomes devoid of life force in death, the organic materials that our bodies are made of are broken down by microbes and returned to the web of life, Earth, from which they came. Our physical forms cannot survive without the spiritual side of us, the life force energy, the vital intelligence, great mother or father, which animates it all through our nervous system, our breath also. Now consider a smaller version of total physical death, which is simple cellular death that happens in our body thousands of times each second with the rebirth of new healthy body cells. In a healthy, well-being individual, white blood cells of the immune system find it easy to handle the job of cleaning up those dead cells with some help from the indigenous microbes. So this is why at any given time, if you had a doctor swab the back of our throats, there would be bacteria present because microbes are never absent from our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
Pasteur, being the chemist he was, saw the connections between bacteria and other microbes that carry out chemical processes within the body. The difference between him and Béchamp was his lack of integrity. The zeitgeist, or spirit of the time, was demanding a culprit enemy for the high level of diseases in the cities, and he was determined to give them one, plus he was incentivized with money, gold or silver, that came from Cerro Rico. So he gave them the microbes as phantom ghosts of disease. During the time of the bubonic plague, the living conditions in the cities were far from ideal, as was their food intake and their belief systems. After all, they had just experienced 300 years of witch burning. They cooked with lead utensils, and so their white blood cells and even microbes couldn't handle all that toxicity, and so they created these buboes glands, which were actually their lymph glands. And the party line of the bubonic plague, however, is that rats carried fleas, which carried microbes that created disease, and that is total nonsense. As the sanitation living conditions improved in the cities, the infectious disease rates were sharply declining by 1910. However, the war on germs was seen to be a profitable one after all, so we needed a new witch to burn. We were done burning physical witches, so we needed another one. So we had one that would make us money, and the oppressive medical cartel that we all deal with today was born in the form of the American Medical Association, owned and operated by big oil Rockefellers. In the 1920s, a scientist developed an ultraviolet microscope, and with this, he found Béchamp's microzyma everywhere. And he was able to find smaller and smaller units of these microzyma, and he found that these small units of life spontaneously evolved into varying forms of larger microorganisms that were solely dependent on the type of tissue in which they lived. So he experimented with them, and when he carefully controlled the toxicity of any kind of the tissues, he was able to have the microzyma evolve into a viral type of organism that created cancer in the tissue every time. Toxicity in the body creates cancer, not a virus. So now we see again how there is an intimate connection between toxicity and cancer, not genes and cancer. This scientist's name was Raymond Riff, and he died a lonely death, peonage death, because this couldn't dare be found out, right? But he showed that by altering the environment and food supply friendly, the environment that and the food supply, that friendly germs can be converted into pathogenic disease-causing germs, and this process is also reversible. Again, Bruce Lipton, same thing. In his lab, he also established that the virus of cancer can be easily changed from one form to another by means of altering what they feed on. his work was all lost to us because of the medical cartel and their desire to sell drugs. So the nature of disease is not germs. The nature of disease is a toxic input that we place into our bodies. Other scientists in the 1950s wrote a book called Rational Bacteriology that has not been printed for a very long time because of the same information. These scientists wrote about how the microzyma morph into bacteria, and they do so to boost our immunity and help the healing process. They were able to show us in this book that extensive studies of bacteria show there's no fixed species of bacteria. Mm-hmm. They all either acquire virulence, which is the medical term of virulence is disease-causing potential. No, it's power. It's power to, it's the vulture being able to eat the dead, or they lose it depending on the environment. If there's nothing for them to eat, they're not virulent. They're not vultures anymore. Assuming that germs cause disease and using anti-germ products is the same as the witch hunts during the Dark Ages of Europe. So the medical cartel of our world claims that Koch's postulates are indisputable proof that germs cause disease. These postulates are very scientific, but what we are not told is this, that not one single disease of recorded history can be explained by using the postulates as guidelines. So postulate number 1 is, in order for a germ to cause disease, the germ has to be found in every case of disease. So let's use HIV/AIDS as an example. In healthy people, the HIV virus does nothing, and yet thousands of people diagnosed with AIDS have shown up with no trace of HIV. It is her silent story fact that we can go through case after case of people diagnosed with various diseases and not be able to locate the germs. The problem is that even if a specific pathogenic germ is found in you when you are sick, there is no way to prove a causal relationship. So in 1993, an American TV special featured "What is the real cause of AIDS?" And it began by stating that HIV and AIDS have no proven correlation. It then switched to the man with the deep pockets of money in the AIDS establishment. I'll give you 3 guesses as to what his name is, and the first 2 don't count. Dr. Anthony Fauci. Dr. Luc, do we remember his name from 2020? Dr. Luc Montagnier of France was the first human to isolate and study the virus named HIV, and he said this: I think people should really think and perhaps try to have new concepts, because HIV, or because AIDS, is not caused by HIV, by the HIV virus. Shall I say that again? People need to come up with different concepts, because AIDS is not caused by the HIV virus. Yep. So number 2, postulate number 2, in order for a germ to cause disease, it can never be found apart from the disease. And we've already given examples of this with number 1. So during any study done on any day of the year, scientists can show us that healthy people are full of varying forms of bacteria, viruses, yeast, and fungi, all of which the medical cartel, with all their money, claim to be the cause of disease. So this postulate is completely erroneous. Postulate number 3, in order for a germ to cause disease, it must be capable of disease culture outside the body. Any scientist or researcher can tell you that it is impossible to grow bacteria or viruses on healthy tissue. So the bacteria or other microbes that they culture outside of the body are done in a toxic beef broth or a broth made from eggs. The difference between a broth and a body, the broth is dead, and the microbes love dead matter. Broth is dead because it's been cooked. Right. They love dead matter. So in order for a germ to cause disease, postulate number 4, it must be capable of producing by injection the same disease as has undergone by the body from which it was taken. This postulate is the basis of vaccines. But in February of 1921, a U.S. government bulletin reported that the laboratory had done a study where they tried in every which way possible to contaminate 62 Navy personnel with influenza. They took sputum from the influenza cases, from the people who were sick with influenza cases. They sprayed it down the throats of these immediately. Immediate transfer, right? Sprayed it down the throats of the 62 healthy people. They sprayed it on the food these people ate and kept those 62 people in constant contact with those said to have the flu. What did the study show? That none of the 62 got ill. Completely erroneous. Now, why do we get vaccines? Another doctor did that during the Spanish flu, same thing. None of the people got ill, none. So the germ theory has never supported the human being. However, it supports the pharmaceutical companies in a big way, giving them lots of money from all the people that they've duped into believing it. And that's what I've got to say about that.
That's a whole lot to say. Oh man, I'm wondering, is my audio really that bad? Because I'm wondering if I should comment for a length of time.
Yeah, your audio is pretty bad.
And I wonder why that is, because I used to use the same phone back then, and everything else is working. I guess if I would have gotten out of StreamYard and gotten back in, maybe that would have fixed it, but I guess it's too late.
Yeah. So let's move on to the topic of silver money and capitalism.
Okay. So we have another. Okay. Yeah, let's talk about that.
The richest mountain ever discovered anywhere on Earth. Beginning in 1545, this mountain produced silver for the treasures of Europe at a rate and in a volume unprecedented in human history. Cerro Rico, which means rich hill, right? Is that what it means?
Yep.
Was a mountain of silver over 2,000 feet high. 85% of the silver produced from the central Andes during the colonial era came from this one mountain. How do you say Potosi or Potosi?
Potosi.
Potosi.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Potosi?
There you go. Yes. Mm-hmm.
The world's highest city at 13,680 feet above sea level has become a synonym for fabulous and inexhaustible wealth after a Miguel Cervantes used the phrase vale un Potosi, which means what? Worth a Potosi.
Mm-hmm.
The Indian miners say that they have extracted enough ore from this mountain to build a sterling silver bridge from Potosi to Madrid, Spain. It produced so much silver ore and required the labor of so many Indian slaves that for a while Potosi was the largest city in America. In 1573, it had 120,000 inhabitants, which grew to 160,000 by 1650. Potosi rivaled old world cities such as London and Paris in size. The vain Spaniards who ruled it chose to advertise their wealth in Potosi's coat of arms, which ostentatiously proclaimed, "I am Potosi, the treasure of the world and the envy of kings." According to Quechua myth, the Inca Empire, I'm not even going to try to say this, Huyana, Capac, Huyana. Huayna Capac is CAPAC.
Huayna Capac. Mm-hmm.
First mined Cerro Rico a generation before the Spaniards arrived, and the Incas called it Sumajorco, or Beautiful Hill.
Yeah, Sumajorco, yeah.
The emperor stopped the operation of mining when a voice thundered out of the mountain saying, "Take no silver from this hill, it is destined for other owners." So this prophecy certainly came true, for the people of Bolivia have never profited from the riches of Cerro Rico. The early invaders of America did not show as much interest in silver as they did in gold. Only after they had thoroughly looted all the gold they could find in America did Cerro Rico begin to play its unprecedented role. Prior to Columbus, most of Europe's gold arrived from the place they called the Gold Coast, which would be the present-day countries of Ghana, Benin, Togo, and Guinea on the west coast of Africa. Since the gold only trickled in through a long, tortuous route, the Europeans sought desperately for ways to increase this trickle by circumventing the Muslim merchants who monopolized the trade at each stage. Spain's need to find new sources of gold was made all the more desperate by the frequent disruptions in the gold trade during the campaigns of Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand against the Moors. Right? We want more gold, but we're going to cause war against you. That's the stupidity of the war machine. The expulsion of the Moors and the Jews from Spain in 1492 only worsened this problem. So, every step in the discovery and conquest of America, both North America, Central and South America, was spurred on by the greed for gold that overshadowed the quest for silver, spices, or souls. When Hernando Cortez conquered the Aztecs, he immediately demanded gold from Moctezuma, and the conquistadors tortured and killed many Aztecs to obtain more gold. On La Noche Triste, the sad night in the summer of 1520, and amazingly in World War II, we have the Crystal Night. Kind of the same thing. The Spanish army was fleeing from Tenochtitlan, right? What's now Mexico City. They were 1/4 of the Spanish army died that night because the Aztec soldiers easily killed and captured the slow-moving Spaniards who were burdened down by their gold. They were so greedy they couldn't even escape. So greedy they couldn't escape. Many of them drowned because of the heavy gold that dragged them to their death as they fell from the causeway into the lake. As recently as 1981, one of these gold bars was found by excavators in what is now known as Mexico City, and there's probably been more found, right?
Wow.
But when the Spanish entered what is today known as Colombia, they heard the legend of the Indian nation around Lake Guatavita, located at an elevation of 10,000 feet in the mountains. And the legend is that each year their king covered himself in gold dust, took a barge loaded with golden objects into the middle of the lake, and gave the gold to the gods by throwing the objects into the water. He would then dive into the lake and swim around to give his golden skin to the gods. And this became the legend of El Dorado. So the conquistadors explored America from Kansas to Patagonia, searching for this treasure of gold. Many of the Indian nations prized gold, but they did it for aesthetic or religious sense rather than a mercenary one. As the Inca Garcilaso de la Vega wrote, there was neither gold nor silver coin, and these metals could not be considered otherwise as anything more than superfluous, since they could not be eaten, nor could one buy anything to eat with them. He explained further that in a nation without markets or money economy, gold and silver were esteemed only for their beauty and brilliance. But when Francisco Pizarro invaded the Andes and seized the Inca Empire in 1532, he demanded a room filled with gold as ransom, and the Incas paid it. So this formed the greatest ransom ever paid, and yet they still killed the emperor, proceeding to then loot the rest of the country for more gold. And today we can still see a small fraction of this gold treasure of the Indians in Lima in the home of a Peruvian industrialist named Mujica Cayo. Mujica. And the Gold Museum, the Gold Museum of Bogota boasts about 35,000 pieces of gold, much of it from the Chibcha coastal peoples of Colombia. Ecuador and Costa Rica also have elegant collections. Yet to find the Indian gold, we must not look in the banks and museums of America, but in the banks, museums, and churches of Europe, because the conquistadors melted it immediately and sent it to Spain as gold bars. So between 1500 and 1650, the gold of the Americas added at least 180 to 200 tons to European treasure. And the churches of Europe still groan under the weight of American silver and gold, jealously guarded, but ostentatiously displayed. By comparison, the gold treasure, the silver of Cerro Rico, provoked as less ostentatious response, yet the impact of silver proved to be far more extensive and profound, because once extracted, the silver didn't stay in Bolivia. It was hurriedly mined into bars or coins that were shipped across the mountains and the sea and up the coast to Panama. So in the first 50 years of the conquest of America, the amount of silver and gold circulating in Europe trebled, and the annual output from America was 10 times the combined output from the rest of the world. Even though Potosi was the major source, the Spanish also opened silver mines in the western mountains of Mexico. In 1546, another major silver vein was discovered in the territory of the Chichimec people, now called Zacatecas. The total output of gold from Mexico surpassed that of Potosi, and all of it's tainted with blood. Every single last one, because they did not treat the Indians nicely.
Mm-hmm.
The silver coins that now flowing through Europe at first promised to strengthen the feudal order, but in the end they forged whole new classes and changed the fortunes of many countries. Even though the silver and gold all went to Spain, it did not stay there. It immediately left Spain to pay debts, mostly those incurred by a profligate monarchy. Precious metals superseded land as the basis for wealth, power, and prestige, and so this easily transported and easily used means of wealth prepared the way for a new merchant and capitalist class that would soon dominate the whole world. So as American silver traveled around Europe very quickly, it made a quick and heavy impact on the economy of the neighboring parts of the old world, such as the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman coin suddenly fell to half its former value, and so after centuries of struggle between Muslims and Christians, American silver probably did more to underline Islamic power for the next half a millennium than any other single factor. And the new wealth in the hands of the Europeans eroded the wealth of all the other countries in the world. Even though the Indians made possible the greatest economic boom in history of the world, and even though this boom gave rise to our capitalist economy, today they still languish in poverty. Today, a second mountain rises up from the valley floor next to Cerro Rico. This artificial mountain arose from the millions of tons of crushed rock residue that remained. And the people call this artificial mountain Huakajchi.
Huak. What else?
Huakajchi.
I have no idea what what that is.
It means the mountain that cried.
Okay. Where is that?
It's right beside Cerro Rico. It's made of the tons of crushed rock that came out of Cerro Rico.
I'll look it up. Okay.
Potosi, the city which supplied the silver for the rise of capitalism, is now out of silver. Bolivia has no more coins. Robbed of its wealth, it has to import paper money. Imagine that.
Mm-hmm.
However, Europe has paid the price for its greed. Spain, the greatest beneficiary of Potosi silver, soon bankrupted itself. The silver of Potosi helped to destroy Spain almost as though it carried a curse written in the blood of the legions of Indian and African slaves who died to supply it. And the curse did not stop with Spain. The money passed into the hands of the greedy Dutch, French, and British traders, And it seemed for a while that they used it more wisely, yet they also fought with one another in war after war. And by the middle of the 20th century, these empires too had fallen, leaving the British no better off than the Spanish. And by then, the economic power on the European continent had shifted to Germany and the Soviet Union, the two nations that participated in the least and profited the least from the bloody money of Potosi. So Cerro Rico stands today as the first and probably most important monument to capitalism and to the ensuing industrial revolution and the urban boom made possible by the new capitalist system. But then we go on to piracy, slavery, and the birth of corporations, which begins to North America, the luxury trade furs. The operations of Hudson's Bay Company grew so extensive and furs so plentiful that then the middle classes could afford beaver. So the romantic stories we've heard of the Indian trappers, frontiersmen, voyagers, and traders struggling against the elements and each other has overshadowed the commercial and well-organized nature of the early corporations, such as Hudson's Bay Company, already back in 1600. The voyagers or frontiersmen have been memorialized as fiercely independent men who lived a rugged life and who struck out from the civilized world in a quest for freedom, individual freedom, and self-fulfillment. That's all bullshit. Because it's all lies. Because in reality, these men would lived as paid laborers under contract to the corporation that kept their wages back in the eastern cities and supplied them with everything they thought the company should have. However, the company would then extract it out of their wages. So few men could leave the company because if they wanted something else, then they accumulated debts to the company. And even if he was careful not to accumulate debts, he would then be jailed and beaten by company men until he voluntarily renewed his contract. So we have this romantic thing about the Pilgrims being freedom. Bullshit. They were paid company men.
Okay.
The connection between Hudson's Bay Company and our modern corporations is direct and obvious, but not as direct and obvious are the historical and economic links back to Spanish silver and the mines of Potosi and Zacatecas. The modern corporation is built on the British quest for American silver and gold. Spain used conquistadors to loot America, and the British used pirates and private companies. So the myth of the pioneer family, or lone frontiersmen, or even pilgrims venturing into the virgin forest to hack out a meager farmstead for freedom, is belied by the thoroughly organized commercial nature of such ventures. The main figure after Hudson's Bay Company was the Loyal Land Company, chartered to sell land. So as the settlers killed or pushed back the Indians, their business concerns grew from trading to starting plantations. Huge ass pieces of land controlled by corporations. Is there anything different today?
Mm-hmm.
The commercial interests of large banks and investment corporations of England exercised a close control over the plantations of both the Caribbean and the Americas. At the start of the 18th century, the financial institutions of our now modern capitalist world operated with well-established joint stock companies, extensive banking networks, and even stock exchanges. The entire economic transformation of the world that started with Christopher Columbus took only 2 centuries. The rapid sequence of changes, which culminated in the building of a power plant in Kahl, Germany, already an atomic power plant in Germany, began at the end of the 18th century with the widespread introduction of New World crops. The American Indian potato provoked the first radical change in the diet of the people of Europe and some of their animals. The ancient Peruvians had been among the world's greatest experimenters with agriculture, and they built numerous experimental areas, the Moray ruins, Machu Picchu, all of that, where crops could be grown in different ways. Even before the Incas, they had ascertained how to produce extremely high yields of potatoes from small plots of land. So in our modern world, producing high yields has come about by developing plants that can grow in different types of environments. But the Peruvians approached the problem in the opposite way. They sought to develop a different kind of plant for every type of soil, sun, and moisture content. They prized diversity. They wanted potatoes in a variety of sizes, textures, and colors. And at European contact, the Incas had 109 different colors in their textiles. None of them created by chemicals like we do today. They were all created by plant colors. 109 different colors.
Mm-hmm.
And we think they're so backwards. They did not seek the diversity mainly for the aesthetic pleasure of having so many shapes and colors and textures, but for the practical reason that such variations in appearances also meant variation in other less noticeable properties. Of course, they produced other tuber and root crops and corn in just as many varieties. The success of these early experimenters remains visible today, mostly in the ruins of the terracing. Why? Now we're going to get, as the Spanish army with their soldiers and clergy swept through the rich river valleys, whole villages were taken away to mine in Potosi, and the rich valleys, there was no longer any need for agriculture because we got to mine silver. Okay? We can't eat silver, but we got to mine silver. And so the rich valleys soon gave way to decay and dim memories. And today, Peru, the land of the potato, imports potatoes from the Netherlands to feed their people. Is that not sad?
Mm-hmm.
At the time of the Spanish conquest, the Peruvians were producing 3,000 different types of potatoes. This contrasts with the mere 250 varieties now supposedly grown in North America, but the simple fact is that we can purchase only 3 varieties, all of which are white to eat.
Mm-hmm.
The Andean farmers also devised and perfected the first freeze-dried method of preserving the potatoes. The Inca also used drying techniques on a variety of other vegetable crops and on meat. So the dried meat, or
Charque.
Charque,
That's what
as it was called in Quechua, has been corrupted into jerky press. Did we invent jerky? No, it was the Incas. It was the Peruvians. So the Indians of the world gave the world 3/5 of the crop now in circulation, and the world has yet to fully utilize the gifts of the Indians. Columbus arrived in the New World in 1492, but America has yet to be discovered. And had the Incas not been such amazing road builders, and the North American Indians, our entire interstate system is based on the Indians' roots. They would have never been conquered by the conquistadors because they were conquered by the brute strength of the war machine, while the Indians of North and South and Central America, they were amazing farmers, pharmaceutical, they do out of plant, right? Europeans were amassing weapons. Brute strength of the war machine that we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a whole encyclopedia of revelations and information that you just
there's a whole lot more, but that was the most, that to me was the most potent, is so to me, I still struggle with the concept of money. I know we need money for expansion, and I welcome money, but so I'm willing, I welcome digits and silica, digits and computer, as opposed to silver and gold, because to me that's all tainted, and I deal with silver coins if I have to when I get change, if I pay in cash, but I'm not amassing or collecting, but because they're both coated in blood.
Mm-hmm. Rather, if whatever you receive, you're gonna use to heal.
Yes.
That's the way I want to think about it.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, money, gold, silver, digits, whatever you
I would
receive.
accept gold and silver, but I wouldn't go out and buy it to hoard it. No.
Right, you're not
Right.
gonna hoard it. You're gonna use it to
Right.
heal the earth.
If I got it, but again, I'm saying I'm not gonna go out and buy it. Right. If
Hmm.
someone gave me gold and vast chunks of gold and silver, absolutely, it would turn into healing work. But I'm not going to. It. I
For
don't purchase it.
for other people, the opportunity to for other people to live in a freedom health environment. That's what you're seeking, and that's
Yes.
it would seem so complicated to understand, but really it's so simple. It's really that simple. It's really that clear. It's like as clear as water. Um,
Yeah.
that's the
Well,
way.
it's as simple as it's clear as I'm with a with the sheer with sheer joie de vivre. I can't explain it any better. This, and we'll get into that next week. The joie de vivre with the Tao of love and sex. Um,
Right. Wow.
we are crafting a bold, audacious form of governance that is self-governance, based on this history, based on
So it's the joy of living. You want me to title that
no,
the next
the
conversation?
Tao of love and sex.
The Tao of love and sex. Even better than.
Yes.
Okay, that's great. That's gonna be attractive already.
And that'll be more
So
than a 1 week adventure. But
okay. So part
that
one,
concept of joie de vivre, the joy of life,
joy of
will come up
the
as
Tao,
part of the Tao of love and sex.
the Tao of love and sex already. So for next time, we will double check the mics, or I'll get out of Streamyard and get back in. I think it's totally fixable for next time, and no changes in the time. I guess it's 8:30 at
Yep.
Wednesday Central Standard Time.
Yep.
The Tao of love and sex. And with that said, should we end the show? Anything else? Just lots of love for our followers, for the people watching. Lots of please be part of this. Please make yourself known. Please share. Please comment. Please be active. Don't be a ghost. Don't ghost people. Be alive. Love everyone, and sending you lots of love from La Paz, Bolivia, and from Indianola, Oklahoma.
So
And
how close is La Paz to Cerro Rico?
to Potosí, it's about a I would say like a 10-hour drive.
That's pretty far.
Yeah, it's not that far, but it's not that close either.
Yeah. Yeah. It's still, yeah. So you're in the region of Cerro Rico.
In the high plateau, I'm closer to Lake Titicaca than Cerro Rico. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
I'm about 1 hour and a half away from Lake Titicaca.
From Lake Titicaca. Wow.
Yeah, very
The
close
lake
to
at the
there.
top of the world.
Yeah,
Wow.
the highest in the world. Yes, highest navigable lake. Hmm. That's it.
Incredible.
That's where. And I don't know where I'll be next week, but I'll be somewhere. That's a surprise journey.
Yeah, there you go.
When you travel open to spirit, you just let yourself be taken, and you don't have reservations, and you don't have
Right.
right. You just see where the wind takes you. But for sure thing, I'll be ready for the next week's conversation. That's one sure thing. And in this wonderful journey, which is as wonderful as this one, or even more wonderful, the journey of learning with you, Ingrid, of sharing this and creating this opportunity for all for folks to really be free and to really heal and to really have a future in for humanity. I totally believe that that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so with that, we're gonna end exactly at 1 hour. So I'll end the live stream.
Okay. Sounds good.